and welcome to the Dr. Tech Show, where myself, Pauline, Roche, and Sweyn Hunter, and occasional guests guide you through the world of online communications in a show where we talk tech, a show which was the brainchild of the late great internet evangelist John Popham. So, Sweyn, how has the weather been this week where you are?
This week, the weather has been cold and frosty and crunchy. And in fact, I can't even see out the window due to the ice patterns on the window on the outside. So it's still lovely. How about you?
Yeah, it's been snowing here. It kind of made a bit of an attempt at it on Saturday. And then by Sunday, it was blanketed. We couldn't see the usual skyscrapers on the far side of the park where we are. But lots of people out in the park, socially distancing, but from the looks of it,
yes.
in their bubbles, but enjoying the weather and just nice to get outside and make snow people. We made a snow woman in our back garden, a bit scary looking. But some of our neighbors made a kind of a Pokemon type, really.
Lovely.
No, hang on, I'm getting a glare here. It wasn't a Pokemon, it was a Ghibli, Studio Ghibli.
Oh.
Very, very professional looking. Lots of teeth and pointy ears and stuff like that. So very impressive. Yeah.
Very good.
So
I have a relatively new niece who was born a year ago in December, and she was having her first explorations out into the snow in Liverpool. So we were getting videos of that. Very nice to see.
Good. So you and I have just been at an event over the weekend as well, which started on Thursday, I believe. Was it Thursday? No.
Yes, it was.
Thursday, UK GovCamp. So how was that for you? Did you go to some interesting sessions?
It was great. I went to a couple of really interesting sessions. I was trying to take notes in some other ones, but I didn't really know very much about. So that was a challenge and an interesting new thing. But there were lots of people. Usually the event takes place in person in London over a Saturday, always on a Saturday, in fact, every year in January. But this year, for obvious reasons, the organisers decided to make it an online event, and they very sensibly, I think, split it over 3 days. Although I think that did probably make a lot more work for them than in a normal year. But it worked really well. They used Google Meet for most of the sessions and Zoom for some of the bigger ones. And there was the usual wide variety of sessions on all things digital and other things as well that had nothing to do really with digital. Like there was a session on books, just because somebody wants to. Yeah. But the wonderful thing about an conference, as we all know, is that the agenda is set by the people who turn up. So you inevitably, by definition, you talk about what somebody wants to talk about at the very least.
Yeah. So there was, as far as I can recollect now, there was 5 sessions over each day, and in each session, at each slot, there were like 4 or 5 different options that people could attend. So there's a huge variety of topics. Data did feature a lot, which I was delighted to see.
Yes.
People commented about that was a bit more than they'd seen in previous years. And there was lots of new people who hadn't been to an conference before or hadn't been to UK GovCamp before, which was great because it's good to have, new blood talking about the things that some of us have talked about for a while. And I also did some note taking in sessions on Saturdays, 2 data sessions, and I attended a couple of sessions on digital exclusion or inclusion as well. So
yes, I was at one of those. I couldn't attend the other one. So what was the tenor of those sessions, would you say?
I think some people felt they didn't know very much about what was going on, and some people had more information, and we were able to share some information about the Digital Access Network, the Northwest, or the West Yorkshire event that I attended the week before last, which was useful for people to know. I shared some information about where people can share, can give their laptops away if they want to, give them to other people for refurbishment and for reuse in the community. And other people had other information. There was one question about, in one of the sessions, I can't remember if it's the one you were at or not, but it was about whether we have the data on how many young people actually need devices in schools. I think that was a data set that people felt would be useful, but we don't have. Even the DFE apparently, they're not sure they have it either. So if anybody has that data set, we'd love to have it.
Or indeed any ideas about how to establish it as well. That would be good if it doesn't already exist. Because I think most of the schemes at the moment are using are using some index of disadvantage or poverty or other, for example, school meals, free school meals, or some other benefits related criteria. But it's probably the case that there are a lot more young people having difficulty accessing homeschooling than are on those lists, due to the way society has become structured recently. So it'd be good to know if anybody's done any work on that. And as you say, if so, please get in touch with us, and we'll have a session, an item in it like a flash.
Absolutely. And if the data is available as open data, even better. Or if you can open the data, that would be fantastic. We'd be delighted. Okie dokie. So moving on, and there was a food mention there. It's appropriately sliding into January being soup month, which I only discovered last week. But it was a nice one to hear about. And apparently, I always like looking up the things that we kind of talk about on the show. And this is very definitely new news to me. And I thought it was a misprint when I read it, so I'll get onto it and then see what other people think. So apparently historical evidence of the existence of soup dates all the way back to about 20,000 BC. Boiling was not a common cooking technique until the invention of a waterproofed container, which started out as clay vessels. Animal hides and watertight baskets were used along with heated rocks. Now, the word soup itself derives from the French word soup with an AE on the end, which means soup or broth. Now, this is the bit that I wasn't sure about. The word restaurant was first used in France around the 16th century to refer to a highly concentrated, inexpensive soup sold by street vendors that was advertised as an antidote to physical exhaustion. In 1765, a Parisian entrepreneur opened a shop specializing in such soups, and this prompted the use of the modern word restaurant for the eating establishments. So every restaurant that we go to has come from that original word for soup and what soup was for.
Well, I never.
So there. That's fascinating
amazing
to me, yeah.
I think technically speaking, it's Soup Month in the US. I think it's National Soup Month in the US. But in these global digital days, we can all join in, I'm sure.
We're happy to share. Yeah, absolutely. So you're a big soup fan, aren't you, Sweyn?
I love soup. I love making soup. I think it's great. And I like to make spicy soup quite often, but also the traditional kind of wholesome broth with carrots and leeks and perhaps some parsnip or peppers. Yeah, anything at all. I'm starting to sound like Boris Johnson talking about painting buses, I realise. So, but I do assure you, it is true. I definitely do this.
Yeah. Well, I like myself. One of my favorites is curried parsnip soup, which I discovered when when I used to buy soup for my lunch when I was working in the public sector, when I could afford such luxuries. Yeah, I like just look and see what's in the fridge and just chucking it in to make soup. Soups are very forgiving, aren't they? You can almost put nearly anything in to make a nice warm meal.
Absolutely.
Like that.
The one thing I always think makes a soup better than if it's not there is leek. Leek seems to be like a magic ingredient for soup. And I quite often add as much leek as any kind of recipe. If I'm doing a recipe soup, I'll add the onion as directed, but plus add the same amount of leek as well. And you never go wrong that way.
That's a good tip. Moving on. This week, Monday, 25th of January, is or was Burns Night, which is a celebration of the life and poetry of the poet Robert Burns, born in 25th of January 1759, died 21st of July 1796, and is the author of many Scots poems. And the suppers are normally held on or near the poet's birthday, which is 25th of January, known as Burns Night, and also called Robert Burns Day or Rabbie Burns Day. So again, Sweyn, is that something that you're familiar with?
I have been to Burns suppers in some years in the past. It's not something I would be attending every year by any means. Usually we do have haggis a couple of times in January or through the winter, and we've got one in the fridge at the moment. So who knows? We might have it on the right day for once this year. Picture I'm showing there is as traditional a Burns meal as you could imagine, with neeps and tatties, and carrots by the look of it, and of course the all important haggis and some whiskey. So
And
that's what
what
they were
is
bringing
haggis
in.
for people who might not be aware of
Haggis,
it?
well, it's a small furry animal that lives in. Oh no, that's just nonsense. Despite what you might hear, it's a pudding, a lot like black pudding or white pudding,
Hmm.
made out of the less expensive bits, shall we say, the offal of sheep usually,
Hmm.
and it's got oats added into it and lots of spicy pepper. And traditionally, it was made in a sheep's stomach,
Mm.
but these days, I rather expect it's usually made in the plastic, a lot like sausage casing.
Okay.
But yeah, and these days also you can get vegan
Mm.
or vegetarian or both haggises. I'm not quite sure what's in them. I'd imagine it'd be beans and pulses of some sort.
Hmm.
But it's yeah, there's great competition around Scotland to see which butcher or shop can make the best haggis.
Uh,
And opinions are many and varied on what makes a perfect haggis.
hmm. Good, nice. Before I forget, by the way, there was a tribute to John Popham, who established this show at UK GovCamp. So I think we got a photograph to share
We
from
do. Give me one
that.
second
Yeah.
and I'll find it. Oh, I say we
John was
do.
a regular attender at UK GovCamp, uh, tweeting, attending events, live streaming parts of it that people were happy to have shared. And so people at the organisers of UK GovCamp this year were very sad to have that John is no longer with us, and we're happy to share some of the things they enjoyed about having him there. And they had a lovely photograph of him with a T-shirt on that said "Social Media Surgeon."
It did, and I will show it to you, except if you're listening on Hope Radio. As soon as I get control of the 40 million um, uh, windows that I have open on this machine, it's ridiculous. Here we go. This might work this time. This is the most clumsy sharing of a screen in the history of the internet. But there we are. No, is that showing, John?
Yeah, there we go. So
Here we go.
the title on the slide is "My mission is to get people to love public services." So as well as being an internet evangelist generally with the community, John recognised the importance of public services and what the effect they have on people's lives, and getting people to love them, and so getting people in public service to share and be more open. I think was something he was keen on, and also then getting people in the community to be able to take advantage of public services to which they're entitled. And John had a regular tweet on a Monday about asking people what they were going to do to help people. And on a Friday, as it says on the screen, he'd ask, "What have you done this week that has made life better for somebody?" Hashtag Friday reflection. And I think some people are still keeping that going. I think Sharon Dale is one of the people who's tried to keep that going. So yeah, it was really nice to feel John's presence at this event. And I think a lot of people enjoyed that. So moving on to our next mention is of an event that's coming up on the 3rd of February, called Tackling the Digital Divide, which we're all very keen on. And this is from an organization called Catch 22, which promotes opportunities for the development, education, and support of young people in need to lead purposeful, stable, and fulfilled lives, and to promote safer, crime-free communities for the benefit of the public. And they work with over 33,000 people across every stage of the social welfare cycle. So they're running this webinar on the 3rd of February at 10 a.m., looking to discuss the impact on children and young people of the digital divide, the lessons we can learn from schemes that are already in place, both from government and phone companies, as well as tangible ideas for plugging the gaps that are still there. And their speakers include Saeed Acha, who's the CEO of Youth Leads UK and Social Mobility Commissioner, Liz Williams, who is CEO of Future.now and Social Mobility Commissioner, Chris Ashworth, who we've had on this show, the Head of Public Benefit at Nominet, Siobhan McDonough, MP, author of Cross-Party Letter calling for digital access for all children, the CEO of Catch 22, Jane Reid, and various other people, including people from O2, Creative Partner, Hubbub, the Director of Corporate Affairs at BT, Rosie Blackett, who's the Young People's Participation and Development Worker at the National House Project, and a young care leaver and member of the Young People's Benchmarking Forum. So I think this is something that we would like to see and would encourage people to tune into, especially because Chris Ashworth, who has, as I said, been on the show, tweeted a thread on Saturday, which directly refers to things we've talked about here, as well as I think will be talked about at this event. And what he tweeted on Saturday was, here's what I think has been behind data poverty being so hidden, unreported, and misunderstood by government, by researchers, by policymakers. He says we've been asking the wrong questions in almost every study examining the digital divide. So in apostrophes, have you been on the internet in the last 3 months is the question that's get asked, and we get a certain answer and project that across the population. We don't ask, is your only means of getting online through pay-as-you-go, or how often do you go without data? We'd never ask, have you eaten in the last 3 months when understanding food insecurity, or have you had the fire on since October, to understand if someone is in fuel poverty. So Chris suggests, I think we need to revisit our questions, himself included. So his point is that data poverty is an insecurity born out of financial insecurity, and it isn't binary. It shifts day to day, week to week for an awful lot of people, and we just need to better understand it. So I think we would thoroughly support that
Yes.
point of
And I
view.
think there's an excellent, I'm just seeing an excellent reply, just the first reply to that thread is from, I don't know who it's from, I don't know who this person is, but she's made the really good point that data poverty was not so bad. Well, I might not put it that way. When people could go places with free Wi-Fi with a tiny bit of planning, but going to those places is not allowed now, and with libraries closed and other places that you can go to get Wi-Fi if you don't have mobile data. It's absolutely the case that, as with so many things, the pandemic has increased the division between those who are finding data difficult to access and others.
Definitely.
So,
yeah. So so we would encourage people to sign up for that Catch 22 webinar on the 3rd of February called Tackling the Digital Divide, and we look forward to hearing more from it ourselves. And we'll keep in touch with Chris and see how things are going. But I think, changing the question is a very good thing to be highlighting. Okay, so we are going to have a guest today, Ted Ryan, who's a Birmingham COVID champion, and he's joining us about 12:45. But in the meantime, we have some stories that we've picked up in the last week or so. And one of the first ones is from the education editor at The Guardian, who talks about digital poverty leading to lost generations of university students, according to vice chancellors. So the story says that tens of thousands of university students in England need urgent help to stop digital poverty from hindering their studies during lockdown, according to a group of vice chancellors and higher education bodies. So it acknowledges that the government has provided laptops and other devices to disadvantaged school pupils and college students in England, but they say university students have been ignored with little or nothing done to help them access remote learning while campuses are off limits. And the group complaining includes JISC, previously known as the Joint Information Systems Committee, which maintains the UK's higher education's digital networks. They've written to the Education Secretary Gavin Williamson to warn of a lost generation of students, especially those from disadvantaged families. They're pointing out that it's critical for the country's 1.8 million university students to have equal access to learning, while so many are locked out of lecture theatres and libraries. And several institutions have told students teaching will be online only for the rest of the academic year. So it is a big concern, obviously, because young people coming out of university in a year or two will be the ones who are getting into positions of making decisions about other people's lives as well as their own lives. So it's very important that they get the tech support that other people need as well. I mean, I think there are prioritization of need, but they need to be on the list as well.
Again, students who find themselves not on campus, whether they're stuck in their own flats in their university city or whether they've gone home to elsewhere in the country, there's also the same point really applies to students as to others. The places that they might have gone in term time to access IT facilities and broadband, and very good broadband. I mean, the JISC, the Higher Education Network, is one of the miracles of the modern world. It really is in the UK. But if you're stuck at home or in a flat, or even in a student room, then it's going to be hard if you don't have a device to connect it up to.
Sure. So if you're listening and you have an experience of that, we'd love to hear from you. And or if you found a way to help yourself or help others, we'd also love to hear about that, because we want to hear the good news stories as well as the difficulties people are having. So the next story is the Keeping Well at Home program of resources and support from Active Leeds, and we hear that it's continuing throughout lockdown. So this is a story on forumcentral.org.uk. So where we hear that Active Leeds and Public Health, who created the Keeping Well at Home resources to support people that are shielding, clinically vulnerable, or have mobility problems to keep moving during the lockdown. This program is to be extended from last Monday to 18th of January to provide further support for people to stay mobile and active at home. And this new program includes online exercises activities via Zoom, an iPad loan scheme, personalized support with a health and wellbeing coach, digital activities on YouTube, activity DVDs, peer support groups, and printed resources such as the Keeping Well at Home booklet. Well, I think we're not surprised to hear that good things are happening in Leeds again. They seem to have done a lot around digital inclusion, for a long time, and certainly now more than ever. So it's good to see this list of activities that are being made available for people, and they're making it available openly so other people can learn from what they're doing as well. I think they've got some good images there of what active Leeds are doing. Have you taken part in any of these online exercise shenanigans over lockdown, Sweyn?
Well, there's a question. No, not really. I ought to. I really ought to.
I do. I tell myself I should do as well, and I have done some, specifically with ACP, who we had Cambola on a show some time ago. She does brilliant a light weights class on a Monday morning. Didn't do it this morning, and a yoga class on a Tuesday. And they also do a Bhangra on a Friday.
Yes,
which is
Bhangra. I think that's fantastic.
that Asian dancing, which is lots of hand movements and foot movements and stuff like that. So it's good to keep going, but it's just hard to get motivated sometimes. But I would encourage everybody else to take part.
I would always encourage everybody else to do it as well. Absolutely. Yes, no questions about that.
Yeah. So good to see that carrying on. So the next story was about from the University of Hull, who are having their teaching conference focused on digital inclusion. This was a tweet that I spotted when I was researching for the show. And there was a couple of linked tweets, but excellent tips, they say, on digital inclusion for Mike Ewan and Techie Tom, including using immersive reader, real-time captioning tools, and accessibility checkers, and also real nice data from a student intern project looking at accessibility of Canvas pages. So this was that was the shot on screen now that Sweyn has about their approach, was the thing that jumped out at me out of the tweets as well. So they have 6 kind of ideas there to summarize their approach. And the first one is start with the user needs, not our own. So tailor support around the barriers that stop people from accessing learning material and adapt to people's needs, which change over time. Number 2, improve access, stop making things difficult. So include captions by default, Canvas templates, blueprints, improved rich content editor. So they must be things that they use particularly at the University of Hull, but it's obviously other people can learn from that as well. Number 3, motivate people. Find something they care about. Oh, this is the theme of our show, isn't it, Sweyn?
This is the one.
It's not the tech is not the end point.
It's the same point as number 1, but just very much more specific.
Yeah. The digital teacher, they include accessibility fundamentals, accessibility webinars, and third-party training paths. Okay, that is something obviously people in education care about, but in our world and other worlds, the caring about can be the place they came from, their hobby, who they want to talk to on the other side of the world, keeping in touch with their family, knitting, anything. And technology can help with that. Number 4, keep it simple, build trust. Oh, I love it when people use the trust word, because it's so important. and underestimated, I think, the importance of it. Provide simple and straightforward advice and tools. Yes, 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 yes. They're speaking our language here. Number 5, work with others. Don't do it alone. And they quote JISC, which we mentioned just now, and communities of practice. And I think we will see more and more communities of practice. I'm talking to colleagues about a digital leads one actually for leads as in LEADS. In new digital leads and charities. A lot of charities are starting, getting more and more technical, thanks be to all the good things in life. But they need help. They need to be able to talk to other people who are experiencing things they are. So encouraging more communities of practice is a great thing. And number 6 on this list is focus on wider outcomes, measure performance. Canvas health check, course, program, and faculty analytics. So this is obviously particular to this institution, but the general headline is one that's worth remembering and pointing out. So it's good to see those summarized, and good to see higher education organizations putting those things together for other people to learn from.
So that is actually this has actually come from a student intern project looking specifically at the accessibility of pages on a platform called Canvas. That's why I think Canvas comes up so much. But really, that could be generalized to any content and any initiative to help people access it.
Mm-hmm. What's immersive reader, Sweyn? Are you familiar with that terminology?
No, I'm not. I'm going to stop sharing and Google that while you carry on.
Okay, we'll come back to that in a bit if you find out a definition of that. So we move on to our next stories from Rory Kesselin-Jones on BBC News on their website, and this is mobile networks to make Oak Lessons site data free. And Oak Lessons is the government supported website that shares courses, or not courses, lessons online for young people. Oh, sorry, just say on the screen there. The government funded website launched in last year's first lockdown as a learning hub in England. Okay, so it's England only. But mobile customers with O2, 3, Vodafone, EE, BT, Virgin, Sky, and PlusNet will be able to browse the site even if they're out of data. Well, that sounds like a very good thing to be able to do. And BT customers will get similar data-free access to BBC Bitesize as part of a lockdown learning initiative. And the principal of Oak National Academy, Matt Hood, says the telecoms firms are now really stepping up, and thanks to them, universal access could be a reality. He says there are technical issues to resolve, but we're confident with everyone around the table these are not insurmountable. Everyone wants to do the right thing for the country's children, and I'm delighted we've come together to make this happen. So the telecoms firms have yet to confirm exactly when the free data access will begin, with the exception of BT, which said it would be by the end of January. So BT has also invited the Scottish, Welsh and Northern Irish governments to each recommend one online resource for school children, which it will seek to zero rate. According to UK media watchdog Ofcom, some 880,000 families are relying solely on mobile connections, and many have data limitations. So, Mr. Kesselin-Jones says it sounded like a great idea when it was floated a couple of weeks ago to get the telecoms firms to waive data charges for accessing all educational sites via mobile connection, and that way you wouldn't have to identify which children were in special needs of support, so anyone could use them without racking up a bill. But then there were some issues with the plan, how to decide which sites to zero rate. So from a cost point of view, he says you couldn't zero rate the likes of YouTube or Zoom, because that would mean everyone would get access for nothing, whether or not they were using the sites for educational purposes. So that would be a business issue. And the other issue, which we haven't talked much about on this show, was net neutrality. But I know somebody mentioned that at the UK GovCamp. I heard them talking about it. And this is the principle that all internet traffic should be treated equally. And Ofcom does say that on its website, that broadband providers must treat all internet traffic on their networks equally and not favour certain websites or services. So with this story, it looks like just two services, the Oak Academy and the BBC Bitesize, are going to get special treatment, although, as we've said, the other administrations are also being invited to nominate a platform that their schools use. So it seems for now, Ofcom are prepared to waive the rules in this emergency situation, but they have made it clear this is a temporary measure. So
Yeah, net neutrality is a big thing that's been discussed and tried to be maintained for years. It's slightly less of an issue in the UK than it is in the US. It's a huge issue in the US because what happens there is that typically big companies have a monopoly in different. One company will have a monopoly in different areas of providing internet, whereas in the UK there's a much wider selection of ISPs available virtually everywhere. And the other thing in the US is that those telco companies tend to be owned by some of the same companies that create content. So the risk is that you'd have Disney content free if you get your internet from one US provider, and then everybody else would have to pay for it. And there's just a real can of worms there. It's not quite such an issue in the UK, although perhaps the best way of putting it is that it's easier to insist that all traffic is treated in the same way because it's kind of obvious that it has to be. But it's a great initiative to make some education sites free. It's a contribution to the overall picture. It's not going to be a fix-all solution by any means, but it's good that. And I think the BBC Bite Size site in particular is very, very good. And it does actually have a Scottish equivalent. There's BBC Bite Size Scotland, which are aimed at the Scottish curriculum. So I'd be surprised if that wasn't the Scottish site that was eventually picked for this treatment.
Great. So moving on to our next story, if we can skip forward to the tweet from North Tyneside VODA, Sweyn, if that one's okay, because we covered a lead story previously. We just want to go on to hear from another part of the country. And this is a tweet from North Tyneside VODA. Do you know someone in North Tyneside who needs help using their digital device online? Refer them here, and they give a bit.ly link to a digital forum for their digital champions. And I liked the forum because it asked questions that, you've got it up on screen now. It seemed to ask questions that were relevant to, if you scroll down a bit, Sweyn, on what's on the screen, what device do people need support with? I mean, I think that's a key thing that people sometimes forget, that, different devices, you have different responses. And then which digital activity would they like support with? And I'll read them out because I think they're relevant as well. So getting started with email, online food shopping, accessing online GP services, using social media, video calling, download and use the COVID-19 app, and staying safe online or other. So they allow you to type in as well. So I think they're really good questions to kind of show some of the basic things that people might need help with. And then they ask who's referring the person and anything else you might need to know. So I think a very good basic form asking questions.
It's a lovely form. It's a form that we can show you all of without having to pretend to fill in the first few pages.
Yeah, yes. So if you're listening in North Tyneside, or you know anybody in North Tyneside who needs help using their digital device online, please look at North Tyneside VODA Twitter.
VODA, what does that stand for?
I'm not sure, but it'll be some kind of infrastructure organization.
Supports volunteers and voluntary community groups in North Tyneside. Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Voluntary something could be.
Yeah. So moving on, we had a story from Manchester, which is the importance of digital inclusion for young people. And this is a company called myoutsourceedit.co.uk.
Oh, yes.
And yes, it does point out that young people seem very adept with technology. But despite how it may look, young people are not born with digital skills, and developing digital skills requires the opportunity to explore and help to learn. So they point out that the vulnerable are more at risk of slipping through the net, not getting the opportunities they need for later life. For instance, they might lack access, support, technical ability, and confidence or motivation. And all of these are essential for young people to develop basic digital skills. And they may lack critical literacy skills, being able to know what's worth looking at online and what you can ignore, and what's not safe and what is safe. And the explanation they give is, when thinking of digital, critical literacy refers to awareness of the interests that lie behind online content. And that skill is only built through frequent use. They point out that watching content is not inclusion. Just because somebody's scrolling on their phone doesn't mean they're digitally included. They may be good at finding and watching videos, but the passive consumption of content is not digital inclusion. And so, for our young people to experience the opportunities that access to the wealth of human knowledge the internet provides, they need a range of skills in interacting with digital technology. And these are some of the skills that actually are listed in the Essential Digital Skills Standard. And they are problem solving, transacting, communication, and creating and managing information. So I think that's a good list of things that people need to remind themselves and others that they're the kind of things they need to get to be able to be critically skeptical of what they're reading, so they don't get fooled, and can be literate about the internet.
It's a really good point. The key point is if you don't have an opportunity to I'm going to say play with these things, because that's almost what I mean.
Mm,
If for some reason you don't have a device, or you don't have data, or all the usual issues, then it compounds itself as a disadvantage, because you will not, as they very pithily say, you're not born with these skills. You have to acquire them like all the other skills that we have.
yeah.
And if you don't get the opportunity when you're young, or when you're at school, then it's not going to magically happen thereafter, is it?
No. Okay, we've got two more stories before our guest joins us, so I hope we have time for those. The next one was Sheffield held a summit last Friday to tackle the city's digital divide, and we picked this story up from Sheffield News. They brought together over 100 individuals and businesses from across the public, voluntary, community, faith, and private sectors to collectively address the digital divide in Sheffield. So key players in the city, such as council representatives, partners from health and education, WAN Disco, Healy Trust, and the Good Things Foundation, explore how a citywide coordinated approach could be adopted to tackle the issue whilst capitalising on the excellent pre-existing work already being undertaken. So this meeting came about as a response to the widening levels of digital inequality that are becoming worse due to the impact of COVID-19, and those who are already digitally excluded have faced significant difficulties, they say, in gaining access to devices, connectivity, and skills. And the mass closure of schools during the lockdown has created an immediate challenge for families and children needing to use the internet for school or work. So, topics they covered included reaching out to those who are digitally excluded, digital skills, access to equipment, and digital connectivity. So it's good to hear another city talking about what's needed. And it was the deputy leader of the council and cabinet member for finance and resources who led on this initiative. So it's good to see it, happening at such a high level in the council. So congratulations to Sheffield for having a conference, and we hope they continue. And if somebody from Sheffield would like to come on the show to talk about what they're doing, we'd be more than happy to have them. So this final story for today, before our guest joins us, is what I picked up on an inclusive design toolkit, which I thought was excellent, because digital personas, that's something we haven't heard about much on this show before, but it is something that designers use a lot to to decide who they're building a piece of kit for. And these personas are intended to encourage designers and other stakeholders to consider the range of people in their target user population. And they point out that it's important to remember many factors affect digital exclusion, including technology competence, prior technology experience, motivation and access, and attitude towards technology. And these personas highlight these factors in a way that's easy for designers to engage with. Now, personas is not something that I had previously come across, Sweyn, before I'd say it's only in the last 3 or 4 years, really, through
Yes,
work at the
I think
Impact
so.
Hub when the Impact Hub was open in Birmingham. That personas started to come into my consciousness as things that people use. Can you say they've been going for longer than that?
I don't think they have been in wide use for much longer than that. No, I think it's something that's come through the service design thing that's also become much more to the fore, and it's a really good way of just making sure that what you're trying to design isn't just for people like you. It forces you to think about other points of view, other challenges that other people might have, and but I'm not aware of it having been in use for very long. No.
Yeah. So I think this is a really handy. Again, it's available on the internet. You've got a slide now, overview of the persona set. So it gives the name. Each of the personas gets a name because it's easier to refer to them in that way. So Derek, Joshua, Ida, William, Nancy, Maria, Kamal, Anna, Robert, Laura, Eric, and Sam, and they all have a cluster size. So I presume that's the kind of amount of people I think is in this particular group. The number of survey participants, their competence with technology ranging from very low to high, through very low, low, medium, and high. Then their use of technology, and then their attitudes to technology. So I think this is a really handy one here. And you've got Derek up on the screen here, who was retired.
Let's look at Derek.
Yeah.
Not his real name.
No. So it says, can you, he's retired. His wife died a few years ago and he now lives alone. His daughter lives in the same town. His son a couple of hours drive away. He has 5 grandchildren, the oldest of whom lives nearby and has 2 small children. He loves spending time with them whenever he can. He also enjoys spending time with friends, watching TV and following his local cricket team. So I think it's it brings the person to life, the kind of person that they might be having to think about. Derek's competence technology, he didn't know what to do in any of the performance tests. He might have been able to guess, but he wasn't familiar with them. And then it gives more details on the variables used to create digital personas. Derek's use of technology, he hadn't used a computer, smartphone, or tablet recently. He might have got a gift for Christmas, I think, but not necessarily. I mean, and if you did get a gift, I hope you got a tablet, because they tend to be the more easier devices for people of his age group to deal with. But
there's a lot of detail here as well about how they've come up with these technological various competencies and the various other variables. I think it's probably too much detail for now, but it's all there if anybody wants to have a look at it.
So the website is are you able to read the
website is inclusivedesigntoolkit.com. And that will take you to the starting page for it. inclusivedesigntoolkit.com, all one word.
And it's from those this part of this project, which is, I think, led by the University of Cambridge Engineering Design Centre, but there are other partners involved as well. And it's really, I think it's really interesting to look at what's happening in academia sometimes, as we did at the start of the show on that University of Hull story, to see what they're doing, because it's been my experience that academia is not always great at sharing openly, transparently what they're doing, but that seems a really good example of openness and transparency that could help other people.
Just hope that gets taken up and developed now, and keep going. Yes.
Yeah. So the other place where personas can be seen to be used a lot is by CAST and Catalyst, the kind of consortium that's come together to help non-profits during to get more digital. And it started before the lockdown happened last year, but they certainly have upped their game since the lockdowns all started, and they're helping a lot of charities and non-profits be more digital and help to understand what will help people in their communities more, and personas is part of that. And I'm using that as well with one of the groups that I'm working with, to help them think who might be useful.
I think we have a guest appearing.
Oh, okay. That's a nice definition of personas. Representation of a person typically based on user research.
Sharing that. We have a guest.
Excellent. So joining us,
I hope is joining us. Yes,
excellent.
Here he comes. Zoom is playing little waiting games on us.
So
there we are.
Ted Ryan, very welcome. Welcome to the Dr. Tech Show.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, it's nice and bright and sunny and white and crisp and even.
Excellent, excellent. So Ted, we're delighted that you could join us for the latter part of the show today.
Thank you.
And please tell us a bit about yourself and your background and why you're interested in joining the show today.
Well, my background is in community education, community learning, and sort of economic regeneration and the arts. So very wide breadth. My current role is supporting local community groups around developing services for people. I work with people who work with people, really, and look at how they develop their practice, how they develop their monitoring, how they inform themselves about data, and how they themselves gather data and then inform their practice because of that. I'm not a data analyst, but I know the benefits of data, and it's having those, in some ways, non-technical conversations with organizations that gets them to see the benefit of it. So at the moment, I'm supporting a number of initiatives within the area. And of course, all those initiatives changed focus last February and March when COVID crisis started. So a lot of the services that they were delivering suddenly became like crisis intervention for a lot of families. A lot of people in this area were self-employed, were on on contracts, which, well, all the restaurants and stuff just closed. So a lot of them just had to refocus from face-to-face activity through to digital activity and that sort of support. So that's basically what I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah. So Ted, for those who are listening and watching, Ted and I work very closely together in Birmingham. So I'm very familiar with the environment that he's talking about. Yeah, you've got a particular role as well now, Ted, as a COVID champion. So we're interested to hear about that.
Yeah. Okay. Basically, Birmingham put a call out. Birmingham City Council put a call out for people who wanted to be COVID champions, and they were. It's on their website. You can still be a COVID champion within Birmingham, and it sort of covers Birmingham. It also covers, strangely, Birmingham's a bit of an anomaly in some areas because whilst a lot of it is the City Council, Birmingham and Sandwell NHS covers a bit of Birmingham City Council and a bit of Sandwell. So, it's on their website as well. So if you want to be a COVID champion, you can get information from there. You just go on the Birmingham City Council website, or if you Google there are other search engines. Then you search Birmingham COVID champion, and you can. That's the one. Yes, that's the screen.
Sweyn's brought the screen up on the web on the YouTube now.
Yeah. So you go on the Birmingham City Council website. You look for COVID-19 champions, community champions, and you register on there, and they'll get.
I searched Birmingham COVID champions and went straight there. So
yeah. What that gives you is up-to-date information, and you get you get weekly. They send you that as a PDF form, which for those of you not on the radio looks sort of something like that, which gives data and statistics, and it gives it on a ward by ward.
Could you just hold that up again, Ted? Because I was sharing the screen.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
And it also then gives it on a ward by ward basis, and it shows numbers of infections and numbers up and down and everything like that. I think the issue for me was it's good information coming out. It's clarity of information, because originally when COVID started way back last March, there was a lot of community rumours. There was a lot of people going, and it's not just the sort of the crackpots. Oh, it doesn't, this doesn't exist. It's 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 the CIE and all those other bits and pieces, stuff like that. There was a lot of misinformation going around, and we did a lot of work with community groups to get good information up on there. Some of the community groups I work with started publicising information in community languages, and some of them have had like 30,000 hits on a Facebook page and stuff like that. So I just registered, became a community champion. Every now and then there's a webinar. So Dr. Justine Varney, who's the public health lead in Birmingham, comes on, gives you up-to-date data or information, and controls the environment quite well, because it's not just people, but you can't butt into it. It's a one-way webinar, but you can put questions into it, and other members of his staff then pick those questions up and either divert them to him, or he then passes the webinar over to them, and they address some of those questions. So it's a big institution's way of trying to control the message, get good information out there, and engage people at a local level in sharing that message and passing it on then to other contacts. I share it with about 3 or 4 groups or organizations who could become champions themselves, but sometimes other people have other things to do, and it's easy to get an email from me than it is to go to get 3 or 4 emails from the city council and decide which ones you're going to read. So it
looks like an absolutely wonderful scheme. I like the list of important attributes for a COVID-19 community champion. It's all about knowing people and engaging with people informally, and being trustworthy and being reliable and listening to people's concerns and all of that stuff. It's a very good example, I think, of a scheme meeting, as we always try to say, meeting people where they are and helping them there, rather than trying to set some complicated structure up that might not quite mesh.
I see that the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government issued a press release today about community champions. They've allocated over £23 million of funding to 60 councils and voluntary groups across England only, Sweyn, to expand work to support those most at risk from COVID-19 and boost vaccine take-up. So it'll be good to see some of that coming out to the community groups.
Yeah, I at the moment, I haven't seen any information recently about through this process about the vaccine take-ups. I know a lot of community groups have done that individually, and there've been a lot of action within certain communities where the take-up hasn't been so high. So I would expect something to come out within the near future. Just one thing about it though, because I couldn't find anything on I looked around for other authorities around Birmingham. Sandwell haven't got any champions, and that possibly could be because it's covered. Some of the stuff's covered by Birmingham. But one thing Sandwell have done, and again, if you're on the Sandwell, go on the Sandwell website and you look for the COVID, they've produced a load of posters for people who live in shared houses. And it says you can put them up with the permission of your landlord and stuff like that. But it's things about the guidance for households with possibility of corona infection, isolate your household campaign poster, what hand washing, food, hygiene, home kits, and this, and stuff like that. So I think it recognises that in a lot of these urban areas there are a number of houses of multiple occupation, HMOs as they call, which are almost like rife for spreading the infection. So they've gone about it that way and sharing that stuff and everything like that. So some councils are doing stuff, and in different ways. Yeah. So that's my role as a COVID champion at the moment.
Well, according to this press release from the MHCLG, Birmingham is going to receive £440,000 of funding, which is an amount, but might not reach all the parts. This will include the commissioning of helplines through VCS groups to allow those with limited access to digital to follow guidance and have support for tests and vaccines. It will include more materials for BSL stroke audio materials for people with poor literacy and materials for those with learning disabilities, and an extension of contracts with existing VCS to accelerate engagement around vaccination. So we look forward to hearing more about that. And do you think digital is a good way to reach people in communities, Ted, generally?
I think it's a way of reaching people within the community. I think there's been a huge run to digital inclusion because of the COVID crisis. I don't think we have defined what digital inclusion or exclusion actually means. And designing anything in a crisis is never a good plan. I think history shows that the only thing that's ever developed either in a war or in a crisis is medical intervention. And I think that's being proved right at the moment. I think engaging communities and people who have access to people is the way forward, because as a local authority you can say don't do that 100 times, but if you get down to a grassroots level, if you get down to the level where people are at, and you've got local people in a community language saying this is what you need to be doing, that's what you need to be doing. We need to work with faith leaders to turn around and say yes, the vaccine is fine, and a lot of faith leaders have stepped up to the mark with that one. They have done so. So I think it's how you do it. I think it's not just a matter of having a WhatsApp page, having stuff on the Birmingham website or any council's website or any NHS website. They are not go-to websites for a large amount of people. It's actually letting organisations take that information, make sure those organisations have that information, and then work with them as to how they share it.
And some of that sharing will be digital in Facebook groups or their own pages or whatever. But some of it, as you say, will be in many other ways, some of which we probably can't even think what they are. But the important point is to get the trusted network set up, and the information that is correct flowing through that network, so that wherever misinformation arises, it can be challenged, corrected, whatever. And wherever information is missing, it can be provided.
And one of the groups that we worked with did that very, very early on. They moved a lot of their well-being stuff online. They set up a COVID digital platform on Facebook. They took some people off it immediately because there was the conspiracy theories and all this and that. All those were just taken off it, and it just became a place for information. It wasn't a place for discussion. It wasn't anything. It was a place for information. And now they were the ones I'm talking about. They're having huge amount of hits on their Facebook page and they do like yoga in the park, they do stretching, they do loads of exercises which people keep on going back to. That's how you get those messages. I think
we've had a guest on from that organisation.
Yes.
Cam Bola came from ACB. Yeah. So it's good to know that's still working really well. And also I think stations like radio stations like Hope Radio will get the word out to people from places they can trust, and things that we've built up the trust over the time. Absolutely. Okay, I think we've nearly come to the end of our allotted time. Ted, thanks very much for coming on the show.
That was fascinating.
Really appreciate your input. If people want to get in touch with you or know more about the Champion program, they can find it on the Birmingham City Council website. If they want to contact you specifically, what's the best way to contact you?
Through the rnr.organisation@gmail.com.
Okay, thank you very much. And if you just turn your screen and video off now, please. You're mute. Thank you.
And that's very much indeed. We'll see you next time.